I've kind of chosen a topic for this morning called God's Life Lessons. Just like I said before, there are signs all over, and some of them are informational. Some of those are trying to sell us something. Some of those are directional. If you follow those signs, supposedly, it'll keep you safe. When you refuse to yield to those signs, well, I can speak from experience that usually doesn't turn out too well. And so signs are everywhere. And I'm reminded, and this is like from my generation, so you're just going to have to bear with me for a second. And the sign said, long-haired freaky people need not apply. So I tucked my hair up under my hat, and I went in to ask him why. He said, "You look like a fine, upstanding young man. I think you'll do." So I took off my hat, and I said, imagine that, me working for you. I'm not talking about Eat It Joe's. I'm talking about signs that God sends, things that we see that are reflected in the mind and the heart of God. There's a sign here that when you walk in, the first thing you usually see is that, a cross. It's a sign of redemption. It's a sign of the song that we sang, redeemed how I love to proclaim it, redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. When it is a sign from God, it's something that I think we ought to sit up and pay attention to. And the problem is a lot of times we're asleep. We're oblivious to the things that are going on around us. So I've chosen a topic for this morning, God's life's lessons. Or another way of looking at it is God's signpost. And I hope that you'll bear with me because, once again, I have to be real careful and not to be generational in my thinking because my thinking goes all the way back to the 60s and the 70s. And there are some things that are common with every generation. You know, I read in a magazine recently that the number one concern out of a teenager in this particular culture, the number one influence in the life of a teenager, what do you think it is? You could say their phone, you could say TV, you could say any number of things, but that you'd be wrong. And there are always exceptions. But the number one influence in the life of a teenager is their friends. And what are the criteria of those friends? Two things stood out, youth specialties. Number one, loyalty. You want somebody that'll be there when everybody else is walking away. Somebody has said this about that a true friend sticks at all times. The Bible says there is a love and that there is a friend that sticks closer than a brother. It's talking about relationships. He that hath friends must show himself friendly. There's a lot in the Bible about friendship. There's also, I found, a lot in the Bible about youth. And what I'm going to say this morning, you might probably have never heard. I'll guarantee you that if you're a teenager, you've never heard it. And here it is. Number one's life's lesson. You ready? You don't have to be perfect to be used by God. You see, we deal in a world that sets standards so high. We live in a very finicky, very ridiculed, very rude world right now. Now, maybe it's always been that way. But now it's like there's this micromanaging microscope. Everybody has been put underneath this microscope, and even our leaders are being scrutinized to the point that I don't know that anybody can live up to those type of expectations. And sometimes I think that teenagers feel like that we expect them to live up to all the hype. Well, I'm standing before you as a representative of someone that is a sinner saved by grace. I'm not perfect. You probably knew that. If you hang with me very long, you've probably figured that out. But it's not required. Perfection is not required. There's already been somebody that's done that. And he put himself and his life on the line when he went to the cross. So that's the first life lesson that you as a teenager or even as an older person need to remember. You don't have to be perfect to be used by God. You have to be willing. It's always been about availability, not ability. You know, years ago, and I've had people ask me since I've been here, because sometimes we're on this little roller coaster ride. You know, we're up, we're down, we're in, we're out. They ask me, how do you do what you do? How can you stay enthused? Because I made a promise. I vowed a vow years ago when I was doing karate, taekwondo around the country. We came to this little place in Republic, Missouri, and the youth director, he met us outside, and there were 7 of us, and we were setting up bricks and all the things that were going to be breaking and all that stuff, and he was just excited. He said, this is the first youth rally we've ever had, and I'm really excited to have you guys here. And so we were excited too. And so we got everything set up, and we began to watch the clock, and it was supposed to kick off at 7 o'clock, and at 6:45 there was 1 teenager. At 6:55 there were 2. At 7 o'clock there were 3, and I went behind the curtain and I prayed, because I could see in the faces of my peers disappointment. You know, we're used to speaking in front of hundreds, if not thousands of kids, and here are 3. And I said something to God behind that curtain. I said, God, I will treat these 3 kids as though they were 3,000. And God has challenged me with that over and over and over again. And I've spoken to over thousands of kids. I've spoken to groups of 1,000 kids. But I've also spoken to groups of 3. And the dynamics behind that is the same. I don't know if you see what I see. I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, and I apologize ahead of time. You see, I see something in Scotty that Scotty probably doesn't see in himself. I see a future youth leader. That's what I see. He's the one that God's given me to work with. You say, you ought to aim higher. No, it's not what I see. I see in Jade and Cheyenne and Ethan and Brady and these kids that come in and they sit on the back row. And I think to myself, you know, there may be among those kids the next Billy Graham, Billy Sunday, Jerry Falwell, people that you may or may not have heard of, the next pastor of this church, sitting right there. And they've got that piece of paper out, and they're hanging on the edge of their seat because they want me to say something that's, first of all, truthful. Did you know what the second criteria of a friend is? First of all, loyalty, and second, honesty. They don't want somebody lying to them. They want somebody that'll tell them the truth, even if it hurts. You know, there are going to be churches a lot bigger than ours. There are going to be churches that have bells and whistles. We're not that. But I'll tell you what, there won't be anybody that loves you any more than we do. So life's lessons from God's perspective. I got to tell you a story first. Years ago, I pastored in South Texas, and in the fall, we had these Georgia pine trees, and the needles would fall, and they'd be all over the parking lot and all over the parsonage. They'd be everywhere. And I was out working one day, and I was raking up these pine needles, and I got to the end of the parsonage, and there was an outdoor stairwell. It's a staircase that led up into a missions apartment that we had built. And while I'm raking these leaves, I thought I saw something underneath that stairwell. And it was kind of this glob, and it moved. And I thought, what is that? And I go, hello, excuse me. It was a man. It was a man. A man under that stairwell. And so I kind of rousted him out. You could tell that he'd been living like that. Now, we call them homeless today, but back in my day, we call them hobos. You know, the Great Depression brought about a certain necessity for people to do certain things that I wouldn't wish on anybody. But there are, in some circles, professional travelers, drifters and grifters, who are called hobos. And I got this guy, I rousted him out, and I asked him 3 questions. I gave you those 3 questions last week. Life's 3 questions that everyone ought to ask and answer for themselves. Number 1, who are you? Number 2, why are you here? And number 3, where are you going? Now there's a 4th question. I'm going to give you the first answer to the first question. He said his name is Roy Langley. I'll never forget it. His name is Roy Langley. I said, well, Roy, what are you doing? He goes, well, I'm sleeping. I was. I said, you don't look like you've had anything to eat for a while. Would you like to go get something to eat? He said, sure. I said, okay, will you help me finish raking up these pine needles? I handed him a rake, and off we went. About an hour later, I don't know if he knew what he was getting into, but we got it all done. And so I took him over to Orion Steakhouse. Now, Roy was your typical hobo. He had the funny little hat on his head, and he had 3 layers of clothing because that's all he owned, a big old heavy overcoat and a scarf, and he had these old floppy shoes, and he didn't have any front teeth. And so I took Roy to the Ryan Steakhouse, and so I fed him, and even to this day, I can still see him kind of mouthing his food. And I said, Roy, it looks like you haven't had a bath in a while. Would you like one? Would you like me to take you someplace? In fact, let's go. So I took him to a motel. And I said, I'll tell you what, I'm going to pay for tonight's motel so that you can get a good night's sleep. I went and I got some shaving, personal items that he could get cleaned up. I took them to him, and he was happy. I don't know when the last time was that he'd been in a bed, but I said, okay, now, Roy, I'll tell you what, you got tonight, and then tomorrow I'll come and I'll pick you up. Well, I went back the next morning, and Roy's nowhere to be found. There's a certain thing about a hobo's lifestyle that's kind of attractive to a lot of people. Number 1, they have no responsibility. They're not responsible to anybody but themselves. They have no accountability. The most obvious thing is they just try to keep themselves one step ahead of the law. Typically, and once again, stereotypically, when you think about a hobo, you think of somebody that's probably a wino or a drunk. Roy was. Roy concerned himself with 3 things. What am I going to eat and drink? Where am I going to sleep? And when I got to go, where am I going to go? And, like the Forrest Gump thing. He went. That's it. What am I going to eat? Where am I going to sleep? When I got to go, where am I going to go? And I got thinking about that, and I got thinking about Roy, and I got thinking about life's aspirations. And I found some things from what at one time was considered to be the wisest man in all the world, a guy by the name of Solomon. Solomon had more to say about youth than anybody else in the Bible. People would travel for thousands of miles, literally, by boat, to sit at the feet of this man just to hear him talk, because he had a lot to say about youth. He talked many times to his own sons. He talked to the sons and the daughters of others. What is there about Roy Langley that is attractive? You'd say, well, very little from the sound of it. You would be surprised at how many people have checked out. They check out of life, they check out of marriages, they check out of church, they check out, they quit. They've been hurt, they've been disappointed, they've been discouraged, they've been disillusioned, and they say, that's it. And life as a teenager is not getting easier. It's getting harder. They say that you can judge a nation by its heroes. I'm not sure who our heroes are anymore. We've been studying in the book of Daniel. Do you know who Daniel's hero was? Jeremiah. And the contemporaries of Daniel are Ezekiel. There was Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, and Daniel. And Jeremiah was one such prophet that he was pretty much their hero. When I look at Roy and I look at those three questions, it brings to mind something that I read a long time ago. Right after the Lord called me into the ministry, I considered going to this college in Indiana Baptist College. You ought to write this down. If I were to call my kids right now, and I said, hey, Rachel, hey, Sean, hey, Tim, finish this sentence. You are now, they would be able to finish the sentence. There's a marquee out in front of Indiana Baptist College, and there's a sign, and on that sign it says this: you are now becoming what you will one day be. And they will tell you that I always followed that up with another statement. If it's true that you're now becoming what you will one day be, what do you want to be? You see, I didn't have to look at Roy very long to tell you what direction he was headed. Now, you're going to think, where in the world did you get this? It's really deep and it's really profound. Are you ready? You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out where somebody's headed. Just watch the direction that their feet are pointed. This is what Solomon said, and it's going to surprise you because you probably have never heard a preacher say this. I don't really know why, but you probably have never heard it. It's in the book of Ecclesiastes. Once again, the same author is Solomon. Ecclesiastes, chapter 11, verse 9. Rejoice, O young man. By the way, that's not gender specific. It can be a generational thing like young man or woman. It can be to the youth, to the young at heart. Rejoice, O young man, in thy youth. Let thy heart cheer thee in the days of thy youth. You know, I think that sometimes we get a bad rap. You know, the reputation that we get as, I think, maybe parents and as teachers and preachers is that we're a bunch of killjoys. We don't like to have fun. And so kids, they come and they sit and they're like, oh yeah, you know, entertain me. You're just going to put me down. You're just going to tell me something that I already know. And then there are some that sit on the edge of their seat and they take notes and they want to know because they recognize this is something that they're not going to hear just anywhere. And it's a sign, it's a life lesson from God. God is not a killjoy. God likes to have fun. I mean, look at what he created. Preachers do not have to be killjoys. Parents do not have to be killjoys. Teachers do not have to be killjoys. Solomon was saying you should rejoice in your youth while you have it. Be cheerful. Listen, there is enough out there to depress anybody if you keep looking at it long enough and hard enough. So Solomon is saying, first of all and foremost, you can rejoice in your youth. You can be happy for it. You can be glad in it. Walk in the ways of thine heart and in the sight of your eyes. But know this. You knew it was going to happen, didn't you? A disclaimer. But know this. For all these things God will bring into judgment. What does that mean? It means be careful what you wish for. Be careful for what you aspire to. Be careful of who you follow. You become like the people that you're around. That's a fact. It's a sociological fact. You become like the people that you are around. Not every way, not all the time, but you do. So it's important that you learn that life lesson. You can have fun. You can rejoice. I get a kick, you know, when Jaden starts talking to me about pool and 9-ball and 8-ball and even talking to me about karate. You know, I can relate to that stuff. In fact, I'm going to do a jump spin sidekick for you. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. I would get like that old man on TV that's trying to, you know, advertise the inverted upside down thing. I'm 89 and I'm young. And he jumps about that far off the ground. That's about twice as high as I can get nowadays, right? But I can relate to some of these things. Now, you want to talk about dating a person, but this is going to date me. Back in the 60s, late 60s and early 70s, there was a phenomenon across America. Anybody want to take a shot at what it is, Scotty? Biker gangs. You know why? Well, because they like to ride Harleys. No, because they wanted to belong to something. They needed to belong to something. Sometimes they got a bad rep. They weren't all, thieves and liars and cutthroats. But it became a phenomenon, especially out in California, and guess where else? In the Midwest, where I was from. You'd see them going down the road in mass, and they would dare you to step out in front of them. They'd run you over. Everybody needs to belong to something. It's a fact of life. The life of a hobo, you belong to nobody. And there are some people that is an allure, that's like a temptation. I don't have to worry about anybody else. I have no bills to pay. I'm not accountable to anybody. I eat when I can. I sleep where I want. I go when I got to go. Those are the things that's all I care about. And to some people, that is an attractive lifestyle. But don't let that fool you, because there's another side to that coin. And it's harsh and it's cruel, and you don't want it. If you've ever been down to the Dallas Mission, which I have, and preached to those guys down there, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. The largest homeless congregation is out in California, where there are literally thousands of people living under bridges, in cardboard shacks. Here's what Solomon said. Remove sorrow from your heart. You don't have to be bummed out. I don't want these guys coming to church bummed out. I don't want them coming here and thinking like, oh, this is going to be great. Nobody smiles. Nobody welcomes me. Not that I'm criticizing you guys, because I think you do. I try to learn their names. I'm going to shock you by what I'm about to say, and I could regret it. We'll find out. If you don't get some of these young people in church, you're going to lose your church. I'm just telling you. You better start. You better start. We agreed to do certain things not too long ago in a meeting over here. And I'm trying not to be critical, because I'm just as much to blame as you are, but I don't see those things happening. And I'm wondering, what do I have to do to shake you up? We got a man here that has a baby, and there's a nursery that needs to be redone. There's a goalpost out there that's still not taken down. What do I have to say to get those things done? You're going to sleep through this thing. Just quit. Just quit. It's easier on everybody. That's what the devil wants you to do. The devil wants to get these guys right where they are and get them sold out of church, because there's nothing attractive in it. And that's not true. There's a lot of attractive people in church. Look around. You're attractive. You've got something on the ball. All I'm saying is, there's a great friend of mine. He was the Odessa Permian's chaplain in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. I mean, they were a powerhouse football team. His name is Dr. Jerry Thorpe. He's what I would consider a keynote speaker. I mean, the guy has spoke to thousands of teenagers all across the country. He had a large youth department. The first message that I ever heard in Bible college, I heard him preach. Do you want to know what the outline was? I just gave it to you. The 3 most important questions that you could ever ask in your life. Now, it's broader than Roy Langley. Who are you? Why are you here? And where are you going? Those are 3 things that we should aspire to. So Solomon is trying to get our attention by saying, rejoice in your youth. It's okay to be happy. Now, I got to tell you, I'm a little bit cautious of somebody that smiles all the time. But the idea here is it won't hurt to smile. It won't hurt to be happy. It won't hurt to sing out. My wife hit me the other day, and she said, shh. She's not here. I can get by with this. She said, shh. I go, what are you shushing me for? People can hear you. I go, I know. I want them to hear me. You know, there's nothing wrong about being enthusiastic. So what do you aspire to? Now, this is not just for them. This is for all of us. I think that in those three things that I said about the hobo lifestyle that are so attractive, they just worry about a place to eat and drink, where their next meal is from, where they're going to sleep, and if they got to go, they got to go. Do you know what that translates to in life itself? Three things: dreams, disappointments, and determination. Everybody has dreams. Everybody has dreams. I'm going to give you the life of a prophet and see if it's attractive to you. Remove yourself from sorrow. Put away evil from your flesh. For childhood and youth are but a vanity. If those are the things that you aspire to, it will be a vain thing. It won't turn out like you think. Sin, for the most part, is attractive. But it'll take you where you don't want to go. It'll cost you more than you're willing to pay. And it'll keep you there longer than you want to stay. Don't gravitate toward that sort of thing. And I'm not even being specific. Remember, this is a continuing thought now. Remember your Creator. That's what he said there in chapter 12. Remember now thy Creator in the days of thy youth, while the evil days come not, nor the years draw nigh, when thou shalt say, I have no pleasure in them. In other words, while it's time to make hay, make it. While it's time to be young, enjoy it. Because there will be days ahead that are not so enjoyable. I'm trying not to be harsh here, because I don't think I will get anywhere. But the idea here is this is not just for teenagers. You know, adults can get into this vibe of giving up and quitting, and there are a lot of things that are tragic, and I get that. There's a lot of reasons why those people are homeless. And so I'm not trying to necessarily judge them how they got in that situation. The answer to those three questions is going to surprise you. Number one, who are you? I'm Roy Langley. Okay. I have no doubt but that he is Roy Langley. Now, he had no ID on him, but he was Roy Langley, and that's all I ever knew him as. You say, well, did you talk to him about Jesus? Yeah, I did. And he had all the right answers. I'm sure that I'm not the first person to ever talk to him about Jesus. Why are you here? Well, it was the most convenient place to sleep. Whether it's under a stairwell or under a bridge or down an alley or a storm drain. Where are you going? Roy said, I'm on my way to Corpus Christi to see my sister. So, as you know, the next morning I showed up at the motel and Roy wasn't there. About a year goes by, same time, seasonal, fall, very short season down in South Texas. Here comes Roy. Walking down the street, walking up into the church parking lot. I'm outside doing something. And I go over to him and go, Roy, what are you doing? You know me? Yeah, I know you. Your name is Roy Langley. You were sleeping under our stairwell and you're on your way to Corpus to see your sister. Yeah. Well, you want to go get something to eat? Sure. Same thing all over again. Took and got him something to eat, got him a motel room, tried to get him cleaned up, went by to pick him up the next morning, he's gone. Third year, same time of year, there's Roy. Hey, Roy, how you doing? You know me? Yeah, your name is Roy Langley. You were asleep under our stairwell, and you're on your way to Corpus to see your sister. I asked Roy a fourth question, and the answer is going to surprise you. I said, well, where are you going now? Well, I'm on my way to Corpus to see my sister. And so he turns and he starts to walk away. I let him get about 10, 15 yards and I said, hey, Roy, Corpus is that way. I can tell you with not a whole lot of effort where you're headed by the direction that your feet are pointed. So I had to ask him this question. I know you're Roy Langley. I know you were asleep under the stairwell. I know you're on your way to Corpus to see your sister. Why do you live like this? And the answer is going to surprise you. Because I love it. What? I love it. It's all I know. It's called habit. Roy had gotten so used to living like that he didn't know anything else. Didn't know anything else at all. So you remember that sign? The one at that college? If you're now becoming what you will one day be, what do you want to be? Well, you remember that guy Jeremiah I was talking to you about? The mentor to Daniel, Ezekiel, and those three Hebrews and much of the nation. He was sent by God. You see, I think that sometimes teenagers think that we as adults, we never are discouraged. We're never disillusioned. We never are disappointed. Can I be honest with you guys? I mean honest. I think I've kind of been honest, but I mean brutally honest. Yeah, I'm disappointed. A little. I was ready for at least 2-3 rows of these guys. So yeah, I'm a little disappointed. Am I discouraged? A little bit, yeah. Am I disillusioned? No. And I'm going to tell you why. Because there's a duty, and that duty, it presupposes that my love and my commitment and my desire to serve the Lord supersedes any disappointment or any disillusionment. Because life is not fair. You ought to write this down, teenager. Number one, you don't have to be perfect to serve God. Number two, life is not fair. Now, the part that you're not going to get is this last part. Neither is God. And everybody sits up and goes, do you believe the preacher said that? He's not. God is not fair. God is holy, and He's just, and He's righteous, and His ways are not my ways. I was on the other side of the tracks before I met God. He's on one side of the fence, I'm on the other. And I met Him at 18 years of age, and He became my best friend. God's desire for you is the same. That first of all, if life were reduced to two things, what would they be? Come on. Number one, to know Him. You know how I know that? Because that's what Solomon's going to say. How do I know that's what Solomon's going to say? Because I read ahead. You didn't get to, I did. Look what he says at the end of chapter number 12 in Ecclesiastes. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Now, I don't know about you, but that means, okay, the guy's wrapping it up. I'm ready for that. Let's wrap it up. Tell me what I need to get from this morning's message. What do I need to get from reading the book of Ecclesiastes or reading the book of Proverbs? I'm ready to hear it. What do I need to do? What do I need to get? You ought to write this down. Number one, fear God. To fear God is to know God, to know Him in the power of the resurrection and the fellowship of His sufferings. It means that you are in a relationship with God. And then number two, to walk with God, to keep His commandments. It's right there in front of you. That's the whole duty of man. When it all comes down to it, that's a life lesson that a lot of adults don't get. To know God personally and to walk with Him. And there is a third thing. And this is the part that's hard to believe for a lot of people. Because a lot of you, even right now, may feel like you blew it. You failed. What was the first thing I taught you? What was the first thing I had you write down? You don't have to be perfect to serve God. You have to be willing. The third lesson is this: God has got a plan for your life. He does. Things maybe didn't turn out like you wanted. Let me just close by giving you a synopsis of the life of Jeremiah. Okay? First of all, God knew him before he was born. You better get that. God knew you before you were born. Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 4. Let's read it. Let's see what we find out about Jeremiah. Jeremiah was called by God to be a prophet of God. When I would then, Jeremiah chapter 1. Jeremiah chapter 1 and verse 4 says this. Then the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, before I formed thee in the belly, I knew you. Everybody in this room, irregardless of prophet, is a person. You don't have to be a prophet. You don't have to be a preacher. You don't have to be a pastor. You're a person. God knew you before you were formed. You get that? Before I formed thee in the belly, I knew you. Before thou camest forth out of the womb, I sanctified you, and I ordained you to become a prophet. Now, he didn't ordain all of us to become prophets, but he did ordain him. I ordained you to be a prophet unto the nations. Then I said, Lord God, I can't speak. I'm a child. Now, you got to, once again, I heard a man say this just recently. You got to read the whole book of Jeremiah to fully understand this. I would imagine that Jeremiah, after getting that message from God, had dreams. Let me ask you a question. And now I'm trying to be not confrontational. I'm trying to be an encouragement, okay? Have you quit dreaming as a church? Dreams are great. A generation that quits dreaming is a generation that's dying. I'm saying that to young people. I'm saying that to our church. Have you quit dreaming? Have you quit seeing what can become and what could become here? Now, I say this, and if you challenge me on it, I am a man of my word. I'm hesitant. If I thought I was holding you back, I would step aside. Okay? Because I want you that much to go forward for God. It's true. I would. I just say, well, it's not working. You know, nobody's fault. I just step aside and say, okay, let's get somebody in here that can do it. So have you quit dreaming? Have you quit dreaming? The best thing these guys got for them is youth. I wish I could think of some famous pool player right now, but I can't. But I want Jaden to become the best 9-ball player in the world. I want Ethan to become the next Superfoot Wallace. You don't even know who that is. Chuck Norris. You know, I want for these guys, Cheyenne, I want you, what's the soccer girlie that does real good stuff? I don't know her name, but, you know, I want you to become the best that you can be. You know what my dad said to me very early, and it always stuck. Now this is what he said, and in light of what I've shared with you about the hobo, he said, I don't care what you are in life, if you're a bum, be the best bum you can be. That's what the guy told me. Did he mean it? Yeah, he meant it. He didn't care if I was a ditch digger. He didn't care, but whatever I was, he wanted me to be the best one I could be. So I'm asking you, did you quit dreaming? Are you dreaming as a teenager? I'm not talking about daydreaming when the class is going on and you ought to be taking notes. I'm talking about if you are now becoming what you will one day be. I don't expect a teenager in here to give me the answer to that question. They probably don't know. Now, some of them do. My granddaughter, My first granddaughter, she's a junior at the University of Arkansas already. I can't even imagine that. Woo, Pig Suey. I can't even imagine that. But in Hattiesburg, my other granddaughter is going, and you know what she's going in as? She just graduated from high school in May. She's going in as a junior in college already because she already has her associate's degree. And I'm like, good. Now, she knows what she wants to do. She knows what she wants to be. And her steps are going in that direction. What I'm saying is, don't quit dreaming. Start dreaming. Okay, so we fell about 20 kids short this morning. Well, guess what? That means, Jay, you guys get to go have pizza with us. You know, Craig, you know, Scotty, we're all going to go have pizza together today, you know. Church is buying. So hey, man, I spent $43.25 on a bottle of creamer, so come on, give me a break. What I need you to understand is dreams are important. But do you think that Jeremiah had it easy? Listen to this, and then I'll be done. He was stoned. You know what his message was? Not real popular. God is going to judge you, and right around the corner is that guy we've been studying, Nebuchadnezzar, Daniel. Around the corner is judgment. Because you've not been seeking God. You've been seeking other gods. You've been doing the things that God told you not to do. So judgment's coming. You know what they did to this guy? He shows up to work. I imagine, dreamt that he would be one of the most famous prophets, and he is, but for all the wrong reasons. They stoned him. One day they threw him down a well. One day they arrested him for vagrancy. He did jail time. When you look at the life of Jeremiah, it's anything but a dream job. Which leads me to the second thing that you should aspire to in life. You ready? Remember now the hobo. Eat and drink, place to sleep. When you got to go, you got to go. Aspirations in life, dreams, aspirations. Number 2, disappointment. You're going to have them. You're going to have disappointments. They're there, and you're going to have them. And in Jeremiah chapter 15, there are reasons that Jeremiah said in Jeremiah chapter 9. Let's look at that one in Jeremiah chapter 9, verse 2. You know what he said to God? This is the preacher. This is the prophet. He said, I would have God I wasn't a preacher. He said, behold, God, you know, he said, I'm a child in verse 6, but in chapter 9 and verse 2, you know what he said? I'd just as soon be a bum. I would just as soon not be doing this. That's what he said. Jeremiah chapter 9, verse 2, he said, I'd just as rather hang it up, and I'd rather go do something else. Oh, that I had the wilderness and lodging of a place wayfaring men, that I might leave my people and go from them, for they all be adulterers and assemblies of treacherous men. That's what he was dealing with. It wasn't a dream job. In that first chapter, there's something that you need to pay attention to. Since God had a plan for his life, what was God's promise to him? I won't ever leave you. I won't forsake you. In chapter 1, verses 18 and 19, he says, for I am with you. So, dreams, disappointments, and then the last thing, if you don't want to turn out to be a hobo. Jerry told me about his years with the Odessa Permian football team. One of the most powerhouse football teams in the state of Texas. Now that's kind of being taken over by a couple other programs. But Jerry was right in the middle of all that. Mojo. And by the way, the Friday Night Lights that you see is not a reflection of what really went on there, okay? That's Hollywood's, okay, that's not the reality. He said that no matter what subject, and he spoke to them, they went to state 9 different times. He said there was one theme that he kept at the end of his speeches, no matter what he gave, and it was this, that there's going to be a time in the game, most likely toward the end of it, when you're going to be tired and you're going to feel like quitting, and that's when winning is done. When you're tired, when you feel like quitting, and by the way, if a preacher can feel that way, and God still use him, and God still love him, then I think that God can certainly see your life. He knows how frail we are anyway. He knows we're not perfect. But because he had a plan for Jeremiah's life and promised that he wouldn't leave him, it's important that we understand that determination is the ability to go the long distance. Now, I got to read this quote, and then I promise I'm done. I got this from Dr. Jerry. If God has a plan for us, how do I want to define success? Success in life is a long chain of obedience going in the same direction. Now, do you know what preacher said that? Anybody? A fellow by the name of Nietzsche, that was an atheist. But that's still true. There are going to be times when you're going to feel like quitting. There are going to be times when you're discouraged, when you're disappointed, when life didn't turn out like you think it should. You're going to want to throw in the towel. You're going to want to quit. And if you could get by with it, you'd hook up with Roy Langley and you'd travel the country and be a hobo. Roy, why do you live like that? Because I love it. That's all I know. I don't know what happened to Roy Langley. After a few years, he quit coming around. I don't know. All I know is this. I have high aspirations and hopes for this church, and I have those high aspirations for these kids, and let's go talk about it over pizza. Lord, I thank you for today, and I pray that you might help us to understand that there's not anything too hard for you, not anything too big, that we're not perfect. We have failure. There are times when, Lord, it's all we can do to get up out of bed. Help us not to allow those disappointments to govern our life and rule us. Help us not feel like throwing the towel in, and help us not to do that. And Lord, I pray that, Lord, if it's true, and I believe it is, that you have a plan for each of us. Help us to walk close enough with you that we can see that sign, we can see those plans, and help us to trust in you. Lord, I pray that this morning, if there's one person that doesn't know you, that this is the day that they say yes to Jesus, that they say yes to the Lord. They say, yes, I want to become a Christian. I want my life to start afresh right now. They can be young, they can be old. Middle-aged, doesn't matter. We're going to give them an opportunity, a chance to be saved this morning. We pray in Jesus' name, amen.